Thank you, Jed. I'm Scott Merrick. This is Met Council TAC Planning of Thursday, October 12th, 2023. This is being live streamed on the Met Council website just as a reminder to everybody. And if you could also please note the meeting norms on the screen to help facilitate the conversation, that would be great. The first item on the agenda is call to order and approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any corrections or additions to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, the agenda will stand approved as presented. Item number 2 is approval of the August 8th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair, this is David Burns. I will move to approve those minutes as presented.
Thank you, David. Do we have a second?
Elaine Kutsukos will second.
Thank you, Elaine. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? If not, Jed, could you take the roll, please?
Johansson.
Aye.
Almeida. Dermody.
Aye.
Reef. Howley.
I'll abstain. I was absent.
Burns.
Aye.
Kutsukos.
Aye.
Mitiko.
Aye.
Ao. Horsland.
Aye.
Atkins.
Aye.
Mayel. Allen.
Aye.
Beckwith.
Aye.
Brewer. Larson.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Merrick.
Aye.
And Haney.
Aye.
Are there any outstanding members? Mr. Chair, there were 13 ayes, no nos, and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Jed. So the meeting minutes are approved as presented. The next item on the agenda, I believe, is accepting comments from the public. Were there any public that expressed an interest to comment today, Jed?
Mr. Chair, there were not.
All right, moving on then. The next agenda item, I believe, I don't have the agenda right in front of me here. Is it the functional classification item, Jed?
Yes, we have David Burns and Jack Corkle presenting.
All right, very good. Take it away, team.
Great, thank you. David Burns here, TAC Planning, your fellow TAC Planning member, and also the project manager on the council side for this functional class study, which I think we have brought elements of this to this group before, but there is a pretty significant change here that, again, I believe we talked about in front of this committee, and we want to show you sort of the results of this change. The change being basically to drop the formerly known as B minor category and shift all of those former B minors or other arterials up to A minors and classify them as such. And we have pretty lengthy presentation and a lot of maps that hopefully you all had a chance to potentially review. So I'm going to shut up and let Jack take it away. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, David, and thank you for the committee for hosting us. I will try to go as quickly as possible because I do know that there's a lot of material to cover, but please feel free to interrupt me and ask questions as we go. So I'm just going to give a quick update on the overall study, but really focus most of our time today on those revised minor arterial route subdesignations, and then talk a little bit about some next steps, and then any discussion or questions that the group might have. So I think we were last at this group in April. And so since then, kind of what we've been doing and where the overall study is. So task 2 was completed, and that was one of the things that we had shared with you, which was that peer region review. And the A minor arterial effectiveness, again, kind of guiding the overall study of how we want to look at minor arterials for the region, as well as our consistency with federal guidance. Task 4, which is the functional classification change process, we work through with our committee members a little bit more efficient way for cities and counties to bring to this group and to submit to the Met Council and MnDOT potential functional classification changes. And we've developed some new website content as well as new forms for folks to fill out, and sort of a map of the process so that folks can understand where they are in the process and what will be entailed. We also presented to you task 6, that kind of future principal arterial functional classification map that had identified some potential short-term and long-term changes for the region to keep an eye on, and especially for folks to be thinking about as they're looking at their comprehensive plans, and of things to move forward as well. Remaining work, we have a little bit of some meetings that we have to do under some project management. We're going to go to the TAC group. We need to finish revising Appendix D, which is the functional classification table that's part of the transportation policy plan at the back of the book. We're going to be presenting that to our project team meeting next month, or next week, excuse me, not next month, next week on Monday. So that we've got that draft revision ready to go. This task, which is the minor arterial subdesignation, we hope to wrap up at the end of this month after this meeting, and kind of one last review by folks. And then we are working on our summary presentation and memo for the overall study. So since we were last here, we've been working on that Appendix D and really focusing on that task 5 of the minor arterials. As David indicated, we were going combining the 2 categories into one, and we're assigning subdesignations to the other minor arterials. And we also took a high-level review of the existing subdesignations for the existing A's. What we heard from our committee was that people don't pay attention to that as much as they used to, with the change in terms of how we do regional solicitation presently. So that was something else we did. We've met with all of the counties. There is one township that owned an other minor arterial that will shortly be likely to be owned by Washington County. So we met with both agencies. The slide was prepared before we met with Bloomington and Stillwater. We were able to meet with them this week. So we had our last 2 stragglers met with. We also met with MnDOT, and then we've been revising maps and spreadsheets based upon the feedback that we've gotten. And we've also been working on that final presentation and memo study report for our work. So the subdesignations. If you recall, what we found from the effectiveness of the A minor arterial system, the recommendation was essentially to combine the other arterials in with the A to create a single minor arterial category. So that was one of the recommendations, and that's what got us started on what we were doing. So our general process for the group, just so you understand where we were, we first reviewed all the routes that were currently classified as other minor arterials, and we applied a subdesignation. So WSB, part of our team, conducted that initial review, and then ISMIS, who's been our partner on this project, reviewed the subdesignations that we came back with. We conducted some meetings if there were some areas, gray areas, and there are. to discuss some potential modifications. Then we did the same thing for all the routes currently classified as an A. And we looked at the existing sub-designation and followed the same process. So then we provided the maps and the markups that we had to the study team. And then we reviewed the suburban counties with the project team in June. We had intended to do the more urban core with Hennepin and Ramsey in July, and with the holidays and some other conflicts that didn't work out. So we brought it back to the group last month to show them the progress that we had made, and it incorporated the feedback that we had gotten from the agencies that we did meet with. So in terms of meeting with the owners of those minor arterials, we scheduled half-hour to hour meetings. We sent them the maps and the spreadsheet. When we met with them via Zoom, we provided an overview as to why we were making the potential changes. We documented those agency meetings, and then we made any revisions based upon the feedback and input and the discussions that we had with the agencies. And we tried to have conversations with multiple agencies where it made sense. If we could bring groups together, we did. But if there was a roadway in, for example, in the city of Bloomington that happened to be owned by Hennepin County, we discussed the routes with both Bloomington and Hennepin County, again, just to see if there were any areas where there was significant differences of opinion or conflict on the designations. We only ended up with one route where there was some differences of opinion between the owner, which happened to be a city, and a county. So I think overall we had pretty good synergy in terms of the conversations that we had and the sub-designations that had been identified. Then we went and we brought the information back to the project team. We appreciated our team reviewing it. There were a couple of ones that had some errors in it, and so we appreciate some of the counties helping us identify any miscommunication on there. So then we prepared the spreadsheets and the GIS maps, and we're here today to present to you the work that we did. We will be putting this stuff into GIS following this meeting. Putting the maps into GIS right now, and to share those maps with you would make it really hard to compare. And so again, we wanted to make it as easy as possible to discern changes. General feedback and comments that we had received from our meetings with the agencies. Agencies welcome combining the A and other minor arterials into a single category. They thought that made a lot of sense. They were supportive of minor arterial routes being eligible now, all minor arterial routes potentially for the regional solicitation funding in the future. They all understood it did not apply for the ones that are going on right now. And agencies were appreciative that they wouldn't have to take the map through the functional classification change process. And again, I think in general, we were pretty close in terms of most of the recommendations that we had come up with for most of the agencies. In general, most of the comments for potential change were made to the reliever and connector sub-designations. Again, there were some of that was in terms of where some of those growth areas and development are occurring. Is it really closer to that rural center area, or is it in that sort of emerging suburban area? So that was where we saw some comments. And then the same thing in terms of some of the reliever recommendations were changed to expander based upon how that route was used. So for example, along Highway 494 over in the Plymouth area, the east side of the corridor, CASA 61, folks seem to think that that really served as the reliever function for 494. On the west side, there's also another minor arterial route, and they felt that that really wasn't serving that reliever function for 494, that it was really the CASA 61 that was serving that role. So there were some good discussions that we had with communities along the corridor in terms of how those roads were actually functioning. It did spur the conversations did spur some interest from communities in terms of other potential changes, and they're going to have to be explored by those communities. What I mean by that is that there were some folks that wanted us to, upgrade some major collectors up to minor arterials for them as part of this process, and we politely declined on that. That needs to go through a little bit more formalized. We can't really do that. And I would say the other ones that the agencies really need to think about is kind of understanding some of those growth areas, what's realistic, and understanding how that could play a role in the future of potential designations. We had an agency indicate that there were other higher priority items for them, and they were comfortable with where things were going with a single minor arterial category. But for them, focusing on the subdesignation wasn't as an important thing for right now. So there are some potential changes that folks wanted to see. There are 4 agencies, I would say, that probably had kind of more interest in terms of some of those network changes, and that included Scott County, Coon Rapids, the City of St. Louis Park, and Cottage Grove that had some other routes, or at least the routes that they had mentioned as being potential changes, but recognizing that that would go through a different process in the future. There was some discussion in terms of the augmenter and expander definition areas. I believe this was brought up by the City of Plymouth, where they felt that they actually had some locations outside the 494, 694 Beltway that were more densely developed and kind of acted more urban core-ish than some of the areas that they would have had inside that 494, 694 Beltway. So again, that could be something, if the sub-designations continue well into the future, that some of those limits and areas be redefined. And then some of the principal arterial routes, there's just a couple of things that folks asked. Some of the interchanges were not depicted with all of the ramps as having been principal arterials. And so our spreadsheets flag those so that the interchange areas themselves can be modified to the principal arterial, which is consistent with the guidance of that the ramp should be what the higher functioning roadway is. So those are things that we have flagged as well. So we did the maps on a county by county basis. You'll see colored markups, and I'll show those in just a second here, but we highlighted changes that we provided in there, and they correspond to a spreadsheet for each of the counties. And they're numbered by the routes. And so we're currently undergoing our final review, again, based upon the comments that we've received from our committee. We'll take any comments that this group has, and then we'll get that updated, and we'll move stuff into GIS and submit that as part of our final deliverables. Just kind of an overview of the revisions. Scott Merrick and his team were very patient and kind with us. We had a lot of revisions for Ramsey County. I think they had the most other arterials of the group. Many of them were identified as augmenter routes because as the county is primarily inside that 494, 694 Beltway, but we also did have some expander routes in the northern end of the county, as well as a limited limited number of reliever routes closer to that urban core area where sometimes it takes a couple of routes to really relieve that principal arterial, and or if you have one-way pairs that are a lot, parallel to those principal arterials. Hennepin County had a mix, right? So they had a bunch of changes because that county really runs the gamut from urban core in Minneapolis to exurban area out, by the city of Rogers. So there was a variety of changes within the county that we saw there, and it just does cover a wide range of those sort of regional subdesignations that affect many of the routes. In general, the more suburban counties had fewer other arterials, but I say that a lot of the discussion that we had with these counties really was on, is that current A subdesignation the right subdesignation based upon the growth areas and the expanding nature in some of those communities that maybe 10 or 15 years ago were a little bit more on the fringe, but are now more part of sort of the suburban core, for lack of better terminology. Cities, there were most of the city ones were not existing minor arterials. The cities just don't own as many that had been in that A category before. Again, most of the city county discussions on some of those routes were pretty in alignment with one another, and we did capture those two cities that we hadn't captured before. And as I had alluded to earlier, we had one township that has a roadway in Washington County. There was a study with the St. Croix River crossing opening to look at some route transfers or jurisdictional transfers, and this happened to be one of the routes that was on that list, and the township and the county are working on some improvement plans for that roadway today, but they were both in agreement on the connector sub-designation. So that's kind of the big overview of our process and our approach and how our conversations ended up. Are there any questions on that?
Thank you for that overview, Jack. Does anybody have any questions on kind of the recap that Jack provided? Any questions or comments?
All right, thanks, Scott. We did send these maps out, and I am not going to go through these line by line with this group. I know we don't have time to do that, and it's not a good use of time anyway. But I just wanted to show you kind of what our process entailed in terms of looking at the maps. So this segment 68 in Anoka County is CASA 7. It is currently designated as an other. I flagged the segment, colored it, and we tried to be consistent using marker color with the existing council sub-designations. So we're showing it as a connector. And then if you go to the spreadsheet that we have for Anoka County and you go to segment 68, it'll tell you that it's CASA 7 and it's to and from points and what the recommendation was, and if there were some notes in there that we wanted to clean up. So just wanted to give that to the group so that you could see this is essentially what folks were taking a look at when we met with them, and we just walked through each of these segments line by line. So I know we have a hard stop at 1:30, so I don't want to go into too much more detail, but any questions on that as well?
Any questions, anybody? Sounds like a pretty quiet group today.
Yeah. So in terms of next steps, please take a review. If there's anything that jumps out you as a red flag, if you could please send them to David or to myself, we'd appreciate it. You know, within the next week or two, we'd like to take this to TAC and get this all wrapped up by the end of the year. So if we could get that, we'd appreciate it. We're going to finish up that Appendix D, and we'll probably send that along to this group as well at some point before the end of the process, as well as that summary memo and presentation for the overall study. All right, that's what we got.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack and David, for the presentation. Looks like we are on the right path to getting our functional class updates. So we appreciate all of your hard work in doing that.
Yep, Mr. Chair, if I could just interject just a quick update. So these changes are all going to be reflected sort of officially in the future as an action item, which will bring the whole scale changes to the system to TAC planning for approval. Probably, I would guess January, somewhere around there, next few months.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, Jed, anything else on the agenda today?
Just adjournment.
Okay, I'll call the meeting adjourned and thank you everybody for your attendance. We'll see you in a few minutes for the TPP meeting.